I'm Homesteading Barbie. Today I'm going to be showing you one of my very favorite recipes, my homemade wine. This is traditionally a dandelion wine recipe, which I will be showing you how to do it that way, but you can also do it with any fruit. I've done it with strawberries. I did a parasite blend that was guava and mango and pineapple. I've done plum wine. I've done just regular grape wine. Today we're going to be trying kiwi wine. So really the only difference in the dandelion wine versus the fruit wine is you're going to add less sugar because the fruit itself has sugar. So if you add just as much sugar as when you're doing with the herbs, then it turns out way too sweet, almost like a port. So if you're going for that, then that's fine. But I like it a little bit less sweet, and I gotta tell you, my homemade wine is delicious. It comes with a little bit of a warning because it's very, very, very strong. It's almost like a liquor. But what's fun is you have people over and you can open a bottle of your homemade wine, and it's so cool. It saves a lot of money. It's a really good skill to have. It's excellent for you. It's almost like a tonic, and I think you're really gonna like it. The first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna run all this wine through a juicer. I could run it through if you don't have a juicer, you can run it through a blender. You want to make sure with the kiwis that you don't puncture any of the seeds, because that is going to give it that weird bitter flavor. So juicing it is going to make sure that there's no seeds in there at all. But you could also use your blender, or you could like squeeze them by hand. Whatever appliances you have on hand will be fine. So let's get started. Okay, so I have sanitized my jar with some bleach and then rinsed it out. And I'm going to be juicing all of my kiwis and putting them into this jar. Okay, so I've juiced the kiwis, and I am going to fill the rest of this up with water. This turned out really thick. So now we're gonna make the yeast. I'm heating up the water. I'm gonna let that boil for a minute because this is tap water. If you just have tap water, you can just let it boil for 5 minutes or so and let all the chlorine come off of it. 10 minutes if you have really, really chlorinated water. Now, if you don't want to do that, you just want to take all the guesswork out, you can use distilled water. I'm going to be using both. For the yeast that I'm going to be using water that I boiled for a while because I have to get it hot anyways. We're going to bring it up to 100 degrees, and it's really helpful to have one of these digital thermometers or a different thermometer for a lot of different projects, but you really want to be pretty dead on with your yeast. You want it to be about 104 degrees. If it's 100 degrees or 108 degrees, that's okay, but you really want it in that nice sweet spot. Then we're gonna add some sugar. Okay, so we're gonna measure out the sugar. I want 1.25 pounds. Okay, and we're just gonna add the sugar to the boiling water. Make sure all that dissolves. Okay, now I'm going to take some of the sugar water and bring that to about 104 degrees. So usually half boiling water and half cold water will do it, but it really kind of get it to 104. That's perfect. Just add cold water or hot water. I don't want to wait around for it, and you do really want it to be pretty exact. So I'm going to take this one is a white yeast for white wine. I want mine to be sort of more light and white wine-ish. You can get red wine yeast. You can get for hard alcohol alcohol yeast. There's all kinds of different yeast, so they all do different things. You can even make your own yeast. This kind of takes the guesswork out of it, which is nice. It's enough for like quite a bit of wine. So if you wanted to, you could use a little bit and save the rest. I just kind of use it all. These are cheap. These are super cheap. So it's like, might as well. It's nice to mess with your own yeasts, and I can show you how to do that. But there's also something nice about just sort of taking the guesswork out of it. But it is good to know you can make your own yeast from raisins and grapes and sugar. So we'll do that too. Because it is good to know how to do your own. And I'm just going to let that bloom. That's going to do its thing. We'll let that bloom for a minute. Put this over here. And then we're going to add, this is Nutrient Yeast. We're going to add a teaspoon of each of these. So the nutrient gives it something to eat. The acid blend makes it more acylic. It's citric acid and malic acid and tartaric acid. This is Pectic Enzyme. This is used to break down pectin to ferment into sugar. So these are all to help the yeast break down the sugar to make it into alcohol. So a teaspoon of this one as well. Okay, and then I really like to add just a few of these golden grapes. This is great because this is going to be a long-term thing. So like 3 or 4 is perfect. This is a long-term ferment. So as soon as I add the rest of the water, I'm going to put the lid on and we're going to ferment it for 1 week. And then I'm going to put this airlock on for 1 month. And then we're going to strain it and bottle it. And that is going to remain there for a year. So we will not be able to enjoy this for a year, a month, and a week. Well, you can drink it a little earlier. I opened a bottle of wine though at 10 months and recently, and it was not nearly, it was my jasmine wine, and I could tell it needed that extra 2 months, and then I just opened it and it had had that extra 2 months, and it definitely made a difference. So try it. Some of them I've tried it like 6 months and it works out fine. Other ones, not so much. So you can kind of taste, and maybe that's just personal preference. Everybody else really seemed to like it. So I don't know, but you'll start to learn why you want to wait that amount of time. And then all of a sudden it becomes delicious. It just changes form completely. So I encourage you to smell it at every stage. I like to sort of get into why it's doing what it's doing and how it smells throughout. It's really helpful. Okay, now our yeast is blooming. If you can see that, it's forming that little foam kind of thing. That's perfect. That's exactly what you want. So that means that the yeast is still good, it's viable, it's doing its thing. You want to mix it really, really well. And then we're going to let this other sugar water either cool down, or I can just add some water to it to get it cooler. Because you don't want to blast that yeast with anything that's hot at all. So I'm going to pour in the yeast. And it's okay if you don't get every last drop in. This makes a lot. So you could get away with using a lot less than I did. Or you can use it all, doesn't matter. Okay, and then this is the rest of the sugar water. Okay, and then I'm going to take my sanitized spoon and I'm going to stir that up really well. You can leave a little more headspace than this, but you don't have to. Okay, and then we're going to put the lid on it and we're going to ferment this for 1 week. We'll be back in a week. And the bubbles on top here, that's a great sign that the yeast is doing its thing. And it was viable yeast. Okay, so that's about how much headspace you want to give it so that it has some space, some air to ferment. And you can stir it up every couple of days, or if you stirred it properly in the beginning, then you don't have to do that. But you might want to just kind of give it a little swirl at least a couple of times throughout the week, and we will come back in the week and do the next step. Okay, so it's been 1 week. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my sterilized spoon and I'm just going to stir this up. Make sure it's all stirred. You can put this in another jar that you've sterilized, but there's really no reason because this one is just doing its thing. I'm going to leave those raisins in there so that it has some extra yeast to make happen. Ooh, it's starting to smell pretty fermented. Okay, and then I'm going to put this airlock on. So before we just had the regular hard lid for 1 week, and then now I'm going to put the airlock on so that air can come out, but air can't get in. And then I can just take my pen and mark, so I said 4/12, and now I'm going to do 5/12 because this is going to sit here for exactly a month. So I'm going to put it in a cool, dark place that it doesn't get disturbed. I can swirl it up every now and then, but really it just needs to do its thing. So I will see you in a month. Okay, so it's been about 3 weeks actually for this one, and you know that it's done because, so when I swirl it up, there's no air going bloop, 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 bloop. So that means that it's ready. So 4 weeks is about the average. There's one that I have going on that has been going about 5 weeks and it's not done yet. This one's been about 3 weeks and it's done. So it just kind of depends on your concoction. So I'm going to take the lid off. And I'm going to use a little filter just to catch the grapes that are in there. Okay, and I'm going to get the corks soaking in water for about 15 minutes so that they'll go into the bottle nice and easy. If you're reusing corks, you're going to want to use a little bit of hand sanitizer or bleach in the water to really sanitize everything. I already sanitized the bottles, and so I'm just going to swirl this up and pour it in. It's a good idea to smell it at this point so that you kind of get a flavor of what's happening in there. It's also nice to take the labels off, but I don't know, it takes a long time and we've got time for everything. So 1 gallon of wine filled 4 bottles just perfectly. And these corks have been soaking for about 15 minutes. I'm going to put my cork right down inside my corker. I'm going to put it in here. Now, these corks I bought, I'm not super happy with. You can see how much bigger it is than a regular cork, and that's why I'm having this issue. So that's something to keep in mind if you're buying new corks off of Amazon, which is what I did. So let's see if this one will be better. Perfect. That one came out just perfect. That's how it's supposed to be. Not bad. So after we bottle it, you leave it on its side like that so that the cork doesn't dry out. And you definitely want a cork, otherwise it will blow up. I learned that the hard way. So the cork is very important. So that can sit. The recipe that I have says 6 months, but I noticed it really needs about a year. So you can try it after 6 months if you want. Sometimes it's done, but not always. So you might want to wait a year. This is some dandelion wine that I opened the other day. So we're just gonna try a little bit. It's so good and it's so fun to enjoy a bottle of wine that you made yourself with friends. It's really nice. Cheers. So I hope you enjoy this recipe as much as I do. Please like, share, and subscribe if you do. Thank you so much for watching.